All right, so we were talking about the four antinomies of Immanuel Kant, and we were kind of left off in the middle of our discussion of the first antinomy: is space and time infinite in extent or finite? And I was trying to come up with some pre-scientific arguments for the infinitude of space and time that Kant and others of his day could have appealed to. Um, but upon further reflection, I guess those sorts of arguments really don't matter a whole lot, because what I'm really interested in is not what Kant should have said based on his own historical context, but whether we today should accept these antinomies um, along with Kant. So, since we know from natural science that space and time are both finite in extent, um, then we don't need to consider anything else, because it's conclusive. Um, excuse me. Oh, the scientific case is conclusive in favor of finitude, um, and there really isn't any scientific arguments that would be taken seriously for infinitude. Um, there are, I suppose, models of um, eternally old multiverses and things like that. Um, so, in a sense, it's an open question, but it's virtually it's a fringe kind of a minority view. Um, so maybe it's too strong to say that it's not taken seriously. Everything is taken seriously in science and evaluated on the basis of evidence, and there's always going to be dissenting views, but there is essentially a consensus that that is so, and there really isn't much serious argument as far as having a lot of support amongst the experts within the scientific community um, to argue for infinitude. Now, the second antinomy is that uh, the idea that things are made up of parts, and those parts are either going to be finite or infinite in number. So the first part of the antinomy is that they're finite, second part that they're infinite. Well, if we think of physical objects in space as being abstract solids, mathematical solids in Euclidean 3 space, then they are going to be infinite in parts. There's going to be an infinite number of points making up the solids, corresponding to, say, this flashlight, or any example you might want to, this razor, and anything you want to use for an example. Um, but with actual physical objects, um, we know that they are made up of a finite number of atoms. Um, there's only a finite number of atoms in any given object. And the atoms are in turn made up of a finite quantity of protons, neutrons, and electrons, of subatomic particles. Now, I suppose there may be some debate on whether we can go to subatomic particles and subatomic particles and so on. That perhaps could go on quite a while um, uh, down the rabbit hole, if you will. Um, but if we take items in that there's a certain number of items, a certain quantity of items making up things, is it finite or infinite? If we take that to be atoms, then the answer is it's finite. It's pretty clear cut. And I think no matter how many steps we go below the surface, um, at any stage, there's going to be only a finite number, a finite quantity of the pieces in question, whether it's atoms or electrons or subelectrons, if there are subelectrons. So I say that because for any kind of a particle, um, if you count them up, the quantity has to be finite because infinity is not a number. Infinity is a concept. Um, so there can't, it seems, be an actual infinite quantity of any physical object. Um, so if we can keep going smaller and smaller with material pieces, um, then it seems that couldn't go on forever because um, there can't be an infinite quantity of particles because infinity is a concept, not a number. There is Aleph null and the quantity of natural numbers and so on. But I think that is perhaps better understood as a limit approaching infinity rather than actual infinity. If we start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can get bigger and bigger towards infinity, but we're never going to reach infinity. So it's potentially infinite, not actually infinite. So the number of pieces that make up whatever the fundamental building blocks of matter is, perhaps strings, um, there has to be, I would think, a finite number of them. So in the abstract mathematical realm, we could say that a solid in this shape is infinite in pieces, but actual objects are finite. So it's not a both-and for concrete objects. There's a finite number of atoms or strings or whatever. Um, so this is, based on the modern scientific understanding, which again we don't expect Immanuel Kant to be cognizant of, but we know about it, so we should reject his second antinomy as well as his first on the basis of modern scientific, modern scientific doctrines. All right, so we got two left to go: causality and contingency. Are infinite regresses possible with those? And we'll have to wait for part 3 for that, and maybe part 4 as well. But we'll see how it goes. So